Right. Anyway, we're on record now. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out straight away if there's any news from anybody, please. And if you're going to do a little bit of news, Henry, right, do a little bit of an overview because we might be covering some of it. So news-wise, we're going to start with Henry. Anything you'd like to add this week, Henry?
I've got a little bit on archaeologists have discovered 12 severed hands in an Egyptian palace, which have been there for 3,500 years. It's a gruesome practice of public dismemberment of enemy warriors.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Can I just mention something about it? You know, the reason why they used to behead people was not because they were trophies. Another reason for beheading people because they had an innate belief in zombies.
I read that somewhere.
Yeah, that's from Heracleopolis. Yeah, there was stacks of in one image you see images of heads and strange figures. They had this sort of idea of this weird sort of beheading thing. You had to behead people because they might come back alive, that type of thing. So the feet and the feet and the arms thing is very much linked in with that with these weird ancient Egyptian belief structure. So okay, is that it from you, Henry? Anything else you'd like to add?
For the two Chinese stone axes that have been discovered, they're 4,500 years old. They've got carvings of tigers on and clouds.
A sow.
Clouds. Tigers and clouds. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Clouds. Oh, that's interesting. Clouds. Very interesting. Maybe what we might do is if after the break we'll see what's the title of that piece then. So
I've lost it at the moment, so I'll have to go and hunt for it.
So what's it called? Chinese axes.
Stone axes.
Right, stone axes. With lions. Do you say tigers and clouds?
Tigers and clouds.
I think we need to see. Actually, I think me and Goff are more interested in the clouds bit than the tigers. And he didn't say clowns. He said clouds. Right. Okay. Okay, Henry. Thanks for that today. So what I would like to know now is there any news from you, Anne? Come on, Anne. You've always got a little bit of a tidbit for us. Come on.
It was St. Gwynwyn's Day the other day. Was the patron saint of Newport.
Well, so tell us a bit about that weird saint.
Oh God. Oh heck. It's there's a bull. There's a bull in Newport, you know.
Is it the one from 450 years AD? Yeah, that's the one.
The story of the kings of Gwent.
Yes.
Oh God, I can't remember.
Yeah, and if I can help you out with this, it's basically this weird bull, this weird legend about a massive like bull or type thing.
It's supposed to be a white bull, yeah.
Yeah.
And oh.
But don't worry about it. I tell you what, if you can find it, you can tell us more about it in the break.
Yeah.
Right, Richard, anything you'd want to tell us, lovely?
No, nothing new. Of any
nothing
interest. New. Of any
interest.
Well,
that's a bit of a shame.
I could bore you to death on stuff, but no, well, I discovered nothing thrilling this week.
All right, good.
I can't believe this. I'm just no good.
And I can. Don't worry about it. Right. You've got to say a couple of words there, Goff. Go on.
I haven't got any archaeological wise that I've come across this week, I'm afraid.
That's okay. Have you?
Oh, I can tell you it now.
Oh, go. Anyway, thanks for that, Goff. Anne, tell us all about it. Go on.
Born 450, Glynwyn was king of Glynwig and an active and merciless warrior who in one raid, accompanied by 300 men, abducted Gladys, the beautiful daughter of King Brecon of Brackenignog, with whom he had a son, the famous Saint Caddoc. To celebrate his son's birth, Gwynlyn went on another raid, stealing cattle from Caerwent. In adulthood, Caddoc was deeply religious and, according to some sources, persuaded Gwynlyn to seek forgiveness for his sins and give up his life of violence. Gwynlyn then had a dream in which an angel spoke to him, and he saw a vision of a white ox. When he later saw the same ox as in his dream, he founded a hermitage on the site of what is now St. Woolos Cathedral on Stow Hill, overlooking Newport. Because there was a little chapel, St. Gladys's chapel on the Ebu, you know. I know you don't know this area, but it's quite exciting, really.
Actually, to be honest with you,
Especially if you've been to Mace Glass Industrial Estate or the new ship, you know, it's all sort of around there, really.
Yeah, I think more could be said about you know, about Newport. We don't sort of talk about it as much, which is a bit of a shame sometimes. So okay then what we are going to do now today, we're going to crack on. We've got a bit of a fest, and it's good that you're with us tonight, so that's fab. Everything is now done in the background, so what we're going to do, we're going to go straight onto those images, and this is, I've got to try and condense everything in from what we did last night. So let's just, if I share straight away. And we do have the people online, whoever's online, so that'll be good. Any content that they make would be good. And I just really thought, you can see this image in front of us, I hope. I just thought that the way we're doing the classes these days, we're doing like loads of different topics and chucking things in, is really much more sort of interactive, and it's sort of taking people's interest and so on. And the stuff that Henry, I know I joke about it, talking about Ireland, but it's very important that we do have these other contributions from places like Ireland, because when we think about it, I talk a lot about Orkney, but then we talk about the power of the stuff that's going on in Ireland in regards to first cremations, some of the first sort of palatable, identifiable linear structures, for example, in the late Mesolithic, Neolithic period, that type of stuff. This is why it's good to look at other areas, and it will come out today quite clearly that you know, by looking at other areas of Britain, you're now understanding the prehistoric period from more than just, for example, Salisbury Plain. You're understanding the prehistoric world from more than just sort of Avebury and so on. So, and Tilbury Hill. So we're spreading the love of prehistory across Britain. So this site itself is one of those sites that for me is enigmatic of the link between the Neolithic period and the Bronze Age, and a sense of change within the landscape. I really went into too much detail about this yesterday, so what I'm going to do is try to pick out the stuff that was really interesting yesterday. This is actually the Nine Ladies, which is a stone circle located on Stanton Moor in Derbyshire, which is in fact 10 stones. We'll talk about that in a moment. So what we're talking about is this itself is in the heart of Derbyshire. It's Stanton Moor, and it ties in with the work that we've been doing when we do barrow diggers next week and the previous week. It ties in with those diggers like William and Thomas Bateman and Hook, and we're talking about Llewellyn and all these different figures that have worked in Derbyshire and Staffordshire and Yorkshire, instead of looking at those barrow diggers in the south. So what we've done, we've pushed the interest of history and archaeology to other areas of Britain. we can what we do. This is the lower part of the map, but this is the upper part of the map, and there are the 9 ladies. Lots of stone circles. In a moment, the bottom map and the top part, Stanton Moor, is 1 kilometre across of archaeology between these 2 roads, and it's rather interesting that modern threats like quarrying, road building, and all the rest of it are still associated with this landscape. So we can think of a landscape that's very similar to Stonehenge in many ways, but not studied as much as Stonehenge. Where in the country would we still be finding stone circles? We wouldn't be finding them at Stonehenge, that's for sure. Well, not directly out in the open for everyone to see. The archaeology within this landscape that we're talking about, 70 cairns at least. We're talking about a number of stone circles. We're talking about this sense of upstanding stones, like, for example, that one, just stones with carvings on. And this landscape itself is a landscape that is put together with its depth, i.e., we've got a bit of Mesolithic stuff there, but we fly into the Neolithic period, early Bronze Age, Iron Age, and actually all the periods pick off the tree like little grapes because it's all linked. So the purpose of such monuments that you can see within this large plethora of a landscape is very much mixed, unknown. We understand a bit of it. It's continuity. It's understanding the landscape, connection with the landscape, mixed in with farming, mixed in with living, mixed in with this and that, mixed in with the sort of supernatural sort of sense that we would get with this type of world. And I'm rather interested to see that there's a big argument over Stonehenge at this minute. Stonehenge is nothing to do with the heavens. Oh my dearie me, what the hell Stonehenge to do with? So, but this type of landscape, people are just still thinking and discovering and trying to link in. And this is my biggest argument when people are absolutely obsessed with, for example, Stonehenge, they take away the light from other parts of the archaeology of Britain. And this stone circle, one of a number of stone circles, you know, there you go. There's 3 there in the lower map, and there's 2 in the upper map. There are other identifiable stone circles and all these cairns within the landscape. And this one stone circle, our 9 ladies, which is 10 ladies, is in fact just under 11 meters in diameter. Not a massive stone circle, but the type of stone circle that you might find, for example, in Cumbria, the little stone circles that you might find in other parts of Scotland. One thing that we need to say is that these types of landscapes existed all over Britain at one stage. It's except there's not many of these landscapes left. And this is just one moment in time. This is only one perspective in time of a monument within a greater landscape. So 9 stones, there's a 10th, was part of the original prehistoric design, or there may have been additional ones as well. Actually, if you go there today, you count 10 stones. So you go around and it's 9 stones, but it's 10. There's 10 there. You do count 10 stones. And it's simply because one of the stones itself had been discovered because it was hidden a little bit. The earth rises up around the circle, as you can see in the background, a little bit of that. Although it is unclear whether this was deliberate earthen bank, unintended result of activities, whether this is in a natural hollow. The stones themselves and other stones nearby might actually reinforce the sense of a deliberate connection or an incidental connection with the greater landscape. One of the people that we will look at after this little thing about the 9 ladies is the chap Thomas Bateman. In the 17 and then in the 1800s, at the time of Thomas Bateman and his lieutenant Hayman Rook. We did realise that Hayman Rook was a bit of a crook, but that's not the pun there at all. Hayman Rook was the one who may have found stuff, but he thought not really of interest. I won't tell Thomas about it. Oh, this is of interest. I'll give him the artifacts, but I can't remember where they were found. Right. And, you know, it's you can tell, you can get a gist of my sense of archaeology. I was wandering along the coast on Sunday, and I saw that there was a bit of a building on the cliffside, and I scrambled up this sort of bank, and lo and behold, I found a human tibia. So I thought, interesting. This is part of a cemetery because there's a church beyond. Looking around, I found a wonderful piece of a medieval bowl. So the first thing I did was go on my phone, got a GPS a designation of that, and then I found the remains of a young female teenage girl's femur, and those two bones themselves I just put back on the bank above, because they I cannot take them anywhere. I got the piece of pottery, and it's important, even with that piece of pottery, I know where it comes from. However, Hayman Rook didn't do the same thing. Thomas Bateman believed in recording where things came from. Again, Thomas Bateman will be one of the people we look at. Thomas Bateman visited this site, and archaeological excavations took place here also in 2000. Now, this is an interesting question, right? Two questions, right? It's called the Nine Ladies, but there's 10 stones. Do we change the name? The answer is no. Because who do I pick on now? I'm going to pick on Richard, right? Richard, we're just going to pretend that your name has been Richard all your life. Hopefully it has been, right? Richard was called Richard when he was a child, and his mum and dad called Richard because it had a set meaning. Richard was a Richard when he was born, right? Years down the line, right, 100 years time, when Richard is no longer with us, and nor will I be, people will say, well, was Richard really a Richard? He was more like an Eric. But Richard was called Richard when he was born, right? And it's the same with these stones. They're the Nine Ladies. They will always be the Nine Ladies, whether there's 10 stones, 11 stones, 8 stones. And who's to say? Maybe 4,000 years ago, there was 8 stones and 2 stones were added to it. Maybe there were 9 stones, one was taken away. So you can't muck around with the naming and interpretation of this site, which has always been there. Richard has always been Richard, right?
I went there.
I hope you stripped your clothes off and ran around.
It's lovely.
I didn't tell you about the time that me and Kathy ran around the Ring of Bodger at night naked, did I?
No, well, you did, but I don't know if I believe you or not. I don't know.
Goff does, because Kathy came to the class and told him that was so. Isn't that right, Goff? Anyway,
and show me the video as well.
That's true.
Apparently, there's 70 small cairns in the area as well.
And that's exactly one thing I was going to tell you.
Oh,
Now, the other thing I hopefully you're not looking at the thing that I'm going to be looking at in a moment. But this is the other interesting thing. In the 1800s, I'm not sure in the 1800s whether it was 1830, 1840, whenever it was, they put a wall around this site, right? In 1985, they removed the wall. Was it right that they removed the wall? I don't think it was, because the wall itself is now part of the archaeology. When you think about the wall was 150 years old. So why did they move it? Who's to say there was never? Who was to say there may have been a wall around it in the first place? Do you know what I mean? So and then we draw in the fact that now people use this site as a modern place for pagans to conduct rituals there. Now, is that the right thing to do if they're moving a wall? All these different things, but going back to this, the wall was part of the site, and so is this modern pagan thing part of the site. Just let these things flow. In 2010, the site was directly going to be the focus of nearby quarrying, and they basically said no. And this is a good thing, because it means that what you have, our Nine Ladies, is part of this sort of greater landscape with stones like this, with nice bits of carvings on them, this greater landscape. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go any further with this piece now. So what I am going to do is I've got a little bit of a bigger piece that gives you a little bit more information about said plan in front of us. Let's have this little lower bit of Stanton Moor. Stanton Moor is an area of upland standing to a height of between 280 and 320 meters above sea level. So it's up there, near the villages of Stanton and Birchover. It forms an isolated landscape that is associated with a gritstone. There are rivers and stones. It's nearby the River Derwent and also the River Wye to the north, and the valleys of a couple of small streams and so on. It's also the meeting point, not only of the grit that we've mentioned, but limestone as well. There's a limestone plateau. So in other words, we got the dark peak, nice that we got the grits, the dark peak associated with Stanford Moor, and the white peak associated with the limestone. That gives you a little bit of a texture of the myths and legends of this world. And so the moor itself, you could say, has been occupied for thousands of years. And yes, Anne, if you are reading this source that I'm reading in front of me now, which is not Wikipedia, this is from the Stone Circle group, this one. There are at least 70 cairns across the site, which is really good. Lots of other standing stones, and new things are still being found today. Unfortunately, what's happened is there were many more cairns and standing stones back in the day, many more, right?
Yeah.
And when I say back in the day, in the 1800s, they decided to make the roads a little bit more palatable for people to use. So what do? There's a stone over there, Anne. Break it up, love. Bring it over here. Bring it over here. Break up the stone. And unfortunately, we may have lost whole stone circles.
Yeah.
How the 9 ladies survived, I don't know, Anne. I really don't know. But to create this landscape, to create the roads, they removed and quarried. And it's that other thing as well, is why dig a hole in the ground when there's a hole on when there's a stone on the surface? You know, glacial stones, outcrop stones, and all the rest of it. For many years, Stanton Moor was considered to be an area set aside almost exclusively for ritual and funeral purposes, but it didn't stop people sort of taking some of the stones for the building the road. But the interesting thing as well is there's not much in the way of houses within this landscape, simply because people thought, right, okay, it's okay to use the stones for building the roads, but it's probably not okay to sort of live amongst this sort of weird, freakish landscape where all these little things stick up, you know. I remember going up to a similar landscape. It's not as much as this, mind you, but there's bits. I remember going up with a chap called Martin and Gareth, and both of them were part of our Rhondda sort of group, and they used to say, right, we're going to go out somewhere, and they used to just leave me in the middle of nowhere, right? They always made sure I had a flask and some food with me, and they would take me for 2 or 3 miles off to nowhere. And they say, look at these, there's cairns here. They would go up where the windmills are up in Mardy in the valleys. There's these little cairns and so on. And they're in a boggy, peaty type landscape, sort of inaccessible landscape with no houses around. And that's as close as we get to this type of landscape.
Yeah.
What really happened, really, one of the things that really happened that stopped people living here was not the superstition associated with this landscape. What stopped people living there was approximately 1,628 years BC. You've got the eruption of Thera. You've got other volcanized activity. The upland areas across Britain is abandoned. And this is one of those such landscapes. So what happens in that, just to give you an idea, people are living in amongst the stones back in the Bronze Age and before that, agricultural landscape, crude ridge and furrow and sort of linnet type landscapes of farming and sort of interaction and the stones and ritual and ceremony and all these other things that go with it. This was in an upland area, obviously 300 meters above sea level. And what's happening is that with this climatic collapse, with all the trees gone, the soil level's low, peat starts to trip in, people abandon the landscape. And in a way, the landscape was sort of abandoned in use, but not abandoned in thought, because what we've got is people continuing to associate with this landscape, with the ancestors. It is then a landscape of the ancestors, a landscape of everything. Basically, it's like scratching the surface and getting lots of things, right? The sites have received attention from those people that we mentioned, including Llewellyn Jewett, alongside Bateman in the 1800s. And this is when I read this out yesterday, I nearly got a bit sort of upset. I read this, right. There was a guy called Joseph and Percy Heathcott in the 1900s. In the 1920s and the 1930s, right, they dug around 30 sites on the moor. Now, when you say around or about 30 sites, we're not exactly sure how many they dug. And this was in the 1920s and 30s, when lots of this was now scheduled and protected ancient monuments. Although their sometimes idiosyncratic reconstructions may have hindered our understanding of the original form of some of the monuments. So what they did, they dug up these remains, and I thought, I tell you what, Anne, we'll put a couple of stones over there. That's what we think it looked like. We'll have a bit of Limoges over here, and we'll have a statue of Lloyd George over there, and it looked great. So unfortunately, what they did, they altered this prehistoric landscape. They moved some of the stones. They added some stones. And it's just like buggered everything up. So that's a bit of a shame, because, and the reason why I got angry, we lambast these antiquarians, and then suddenly 100 years later, somebody's doing exactly the same thing. In our century, when we were born, much of what remains is now covered in thick layers of heather. We'll leave this one as a final thought. While increasing visitor numbers have led to erosion on the moor, particularly around the area of the Nine Ladies, which has led to the site being resurfaced with new turf. You can actually see the difference between that and where people are really, you can actually see where they have actually returfed. And the problem is with footfall and people go into this type of landscape, it directly threatens the past. And again, it's not, people say, oh, let's not have the quarries, babes, it's going to affect the site. We need to be able to see this landscape. Personally, I'm going to say I don't agree with the right to roam in Britain. I'm actually a landowner myself now, and you know, we've got an archaeological site here, and it's out of bounds for the to the public completely, because we're protecting it, right? So the fact of the matter is, this is what the right to roam does. It damages the archaeological landscape. It damages the natural flora and fauna of the landscape. It isn't good. There's sheep being affected. There's cows and everything being affected. This is why lots of landowners don't like members of the public seeing archaeological sites, simply because they act irresponsibly. And this is, you know, if you're going to see an archaeological site like this, low numbers of the public seeing it, spread the footfall to other sites. And the reason why I'm lecturing you like this is because when I've gone to Orkney, one of the things that they say in Orkney is that they say to people, right, you want to go to Scarborough? Yeah. And then they say to another group, do you want to go to Maeshowe? Yeah. Do you want to go to Minehow? Yes. Do you want to go to the museum at Kirkwall? Yeah. Do you want to go to the Nessa Brodgar? Yeah. Do you want to go to Bursay in Orkney? Yeah. Do you want to go to the Broch of Gurness? What they do in Orkney, they throw people around the island. In other words, the footfall is limited per these sites. And I'm not, I think, Anne and Henry, I think that might be the approach in Ireland as well. But it's not the approach in Derbyshire, where you have flocks of tourists and bus loads and stuff. Again, these type of sites need to be closed for certain times of the year. And in a way, I hate to say it, Anne, I really hate to say it. As much as I can't stand English heritage and what they do with what they've done with Stonehenge, in a way, stopping people from going up to Stonehenge and touching the stones and saying, hey, mommy, this is a standing stone, it's been here for thousands of years, let's urinate against it.
There's too many people now.
They're protecting Stonehenge, so you can't exactly get near it. But one thing, mind my French, in the right context, this is an expletive warning. One thing that pisses me off about Stonehenge is that certain times of the year, They
Yeah.
allow people to jump up and run around Stonehenge, jump on top of the capstones and all the rest of Stonehenge, right? I have seen people defecating at Stonehenge, hitting up against the stones at Stonehenge, right? And I'm not joking, right? I have been there and I had to walk away, right? So English Heritage allows this at solstice. To be honest with you, all those people should be lined up against a wall and shot. It's not part of their history, right? They've got no right to damage their history. It's in national care. Don't allow them there on the solstice.
Mm.
Anyway, people hate me for saying this, but at the end of the day, if you're going to get people to love and understand history, you don't do the things that I've just explained.
And
So,
also, it's the amount of people now. It's got so popular. You know, not just Stonehenge, but everywhere, walking, you know, it's just got so popular that there are loads of people now, whereas there didn't used to be so many.
But the thing is, Anne, right? I think I'm going to disagree with one point. They're probably concentrated into set areas, right?
Mm.
and so I'm going to agree with what you just said. That there's more people, or there's probably as much, but they seem to be focused into these key sites. And I don't know if you were with me, Anne. Did you ever go to that site in Wiltshire called Stanton Drew? It was next door to a pub in the field, and the field was full of sheep.
Oh,
And
yes, I did.
well, that type of site would be perfect for people to go to, but people don't go and see it. So what you
No.
do, you get people to go and see Stanton Drew. It's good for the local local tourist economy, right? And say to the farmer, right? You know, we'll pay you for members of the public to go on, yeah, right, at certain times of the year, and
Yeah.
that gets people away from Stonehenge. Oh God,
Mm.
I'm really bombastic and lecturing today. So what I would like to do next is I would like to. I don't know if there's any of you guys, right? I don't know if there's any of you guys, but last week we mentioned this thing about barrows at the end of last week's lecture, and we mentioned in the early barrow diggers the following, and there were three comments. One person said I made it up, another person said I definitely made it up, and somebody said I was smoking weed, right? So I'm gonna read the following out. It says, like others of his time, Thomas Bateman found difficulty in breaking down the chronology of the burials he disinterred, though he distinguished a Stone Age followed by one of metal. Stop. That's not the bit that people are upset with, right? He said that these bigger sites, right, were earlier than these smaller sites, these round barrows, right? He said that these were later. These came in a metal age, and he said that this came in a Stone Age, right? That's what he said, right? However, the way he presented it makes people think that he was on opium, right? But I'll explain what he meant in a moment. Now, let's see what he says. Thomas Bateman said he established to his own satisfaction the priority of gylocephalic, long-headed skulls. So he said that these long-headed skulls, these long-headed skulls belonged to these remains, and the long-headed skulls were from an earlier period in the Stonehenge. This is what he said, right? And then he said that the ones from the rounded barrows, like these ones, which were from the Metal Age, he said, and basically earthen mounds in Wiltshire and the stone circular mounds in the north, like Derbyshire and say Orkney or whatever. He said that these ones, in them they found they found what's referred to as brachycephalic, broad-headed or round-skulled people in these ones. This is what he said. He said, so in other words, the round-headed skulled peoples were in these ones, which was later, and the long-headed ones were in these ones. And basically, there were a few people nodding last week and saying, "Oh, you know, Carl's got to have made this up," but I didn't. I didn't make this up at all. And I think what he's trying to say is this: maybe the evidence in these earlier remains from the Neolithic period. So we're talking, let's just do a date range here, 6,000 years ago. He said that people in these ones from 6,000 years ago were probably a little bit distorted, were probably bigger skulls, right? And then when you go to these ones, they were smaller skulls, right? Just trying to make it easier for us to understand, right? And it might have been that actually people might have had bigger skulls in an earlier period. You're talking about 2,000 years in distance or 1,000 years in distance, right? He vaguely looked at that, right? It may have actually been a different racial type that was buried in these ones and these ones, right? So we've got different ways of looking at this, whether any of those is right or wrong. But what, in essence, his point was correct. This is the point. In essence, he had differentiated between bigger skulls, earlier Stone Age, right, to smaller skulls, rounder skulls, Bronze Age, and maybe Iron Age. So this metal period. He assigned the chambered cairns of the peak to the most remote antiquity, when the sole material from the for the spear and arrow was flint. So in other words, lots of those lots of the other thing as well as this is the thing, you see, right? This is the thing. He also struggled with something here, and you can see the struggle. I have said that so we got the chambered cairns of the peak to the most remote antiquity, when the sole material for the spear and arrow was flint. So what he was hang on a minute, what's happened?
Can I just stop you, Carl? You've got a software update.
It's gone. It's gone. Right. It's gone. It's gone. So in other words, so basically what he's saying is, up where he is in Derbyshire, these types of remains, these chambered cairns, actually he found material of flint in them, right? So this is from an earlier period. And then in amongst this landscape that he's also talking about, as you've got there, the round barrows or the cairns themselves, he's saying these were from a later period, because what he was finding was metal objects in them. This is the point. So in other words, Bateman was actually correct. Bateman's presumption was actually correct. So these are actually definitely earlier, and the circular ones are definitely later from the skulls. So he's coming across more smaller circular skulls. It might actually be another point to be made here, which is off the wall, but it might be that predominantly more women's skulls are represented in rounder barrows, and women's skulls are smaller than male skulls. But that's another way of looking at it. But I'm not saying that's whether right or wrong. Bateman regarded the cairn builders as living centuries, perhaps tens of centuries, before the lust of the conquest tempted the Roman legions across the Channel. He was also correct. He didn't go any further, but then again, did he need to go any further?
No.
Bateman was laid to rest on a hillside at Middleton, behind the chapel built by his grandfather in 1827. And this is why we raised this from last week. I wanted to go into this from last week. And Dell said he can't join us tonight because he's unwell. Right, so there you go. So that's the Bateman thing, right? I wanted to say about that, but that was the Bateman thing. So the next thing I'd like to do, and if anyone's online, please come and say hello. There's a couple of people online, so that's good. So what we are going to do next, we're going to go on to part 3. And part 3, and I'm just going to mention a little bit about this actually. The sites in the Neolithic period are much bigger, right? Oh, and I was meant to tell you a little bit about Bellas Nap anyway. So I need to tell you about Bellas Nap. This is Bellas Nap. So I'm going to put Bellas Nap up here now. So this is definitely a Neolithic chambered long barrow. But obviously, before I mention anything about this site, and we won't go into massive detail about it because we've got lots to do, but bigger monuments in the Neolithic period 6,000 years ago as opposed to smaller monuments in the Bronze Age. and these sort of they were predominantly bell barrows, which were typically bell shaped, disc barrows, which is basically a ditch, a bank, and then what you then find is a flat area and a nipple in the middle, right? Or you could equally have the other way around, a ditch and a bank and a ditch first, or whatever way you want to look at it. But they're different shapes, but they were inevitably circular. So what I want us to do is just basically mention Bella Snap, and Bella Snap is there. There's Bella Snap. We love Bella Snap. I can actually put the light on now as well because I can't see what I'm bloody doing. So there we go. Light. Good. Light action. Good. I can see now. Bella Snap. I've never seen Bella Snap, but it's a really fine chamber, and it's a little bit of information about it now anyway. Oh, there we go. That is actually one of the entrance. That is actually known as a false entrance into Bella Snap, right? So it had 5 entrances. One wasn't actually an entrance, and the other 4 were, right? And I remember when I did this yesterday, I actually went onto Google, and we got a site plan. And I think I might do that now because it makes Bella Snap come alive a little bit more. And Elise has actually joined us online. Thank you for joining us, Elise. And we've still got a couple of others
Is
as well.
Nap with an N or K?
As in, no. I'm glad you asked. It was with a K, as in cold nap in Barry.
All right.
Nap.
Yeah.
Canap. So we know where this is. Again, just sort of remind us where it is. There it is. This is the 2 images on Wikipedia, so that's good. So there it is. It's in Gloucestershire. It's in the care of English Heritage, and it is actually. And actually, I know I've lambasted English Heritage and because of Stonehenge, and I really shouldn't do that, but this is actually a well-maintained site as well. But if this was a Cadw site, it would be full of rubbish, and it would be falling apart. So English Heritage and Scottish Heritage and Irish Heritage do a lot better job than Cowboy Heritage in Wales. So Bellas. Interesting enough, the word for this Bella Snap, B-E-L-A-S, Bella Snap, K-N-A-P. Bellus is from the Latin beautiful. Belus, 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 bellas, belus, 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 beautiful. And your belus, bellissimo. Actually, bellissimo, yeah, bellissimo. Wonderful, beautiful. Belus. Beautiful. That's where we get the name from. And the word nap is basically a mound, top, crest, hillock, or whatever. Bellow snap. So this site itself, and also one thing that I avoid like the plague, I hate terminologies like Cotswold 7 Carn, right? Basically, because they're around the 7, right? You've got these sites that are referred to as Cotswold 7 Carns, but when we did research about this years ago, we actually started to find them in Kent. So it doesn't actually mean anything. It's like saying, oh, I tell you what, it's like being damn right racist and saying, oh, all those people over there, they're English, they are, and then people say, no, I'm actually from Scotland, I'm actually from Pakistan, right? So I don't like this sort of lumping every people. Or you know, all these types of sites in categories. I don't like it. I hate it. So outstanding examples represent a group of barrows, but technically Cotswold 7 is a group of long barrows. This is the point. So history and purpose. So the construction of these sites is estimated to have taken place at least beyond 5,000 years ago. 6 to 5,000 years ago. We're realizing that they actually date to a lot earlier now. So what I did yesterday, I went onto Google, and I'm going to do the same thing today because this site is fascinating. And I did actually say that if I don't get through everything yesterday, then obviously I don't think we're doing anything on Ireland today, because we're not going to do it. We'll be doing Ireland next week. But we might have a little break in about quarter of an hour as well. So, but it won't be a long break. So I'm going to go on to Google now, and hopefully my search bar on Google won't come up to the search I did earlier on of a woman with big jugs. So that was basically a woman holding two jugs, not what you think it meant. So right, anyway, so right, moving on to this now. So if we look at Bella Snap, so you can see Bella Snap, they come up straight away. So we go there, and what we got is images, and lots of images with Bella Snap. And what we're going to do is these are some of the, this is actually going inside, so it's a nice little arrangement inside. That one in the middle there is actually the false entrance at the front, and if you look at the plan here, you'll be able to understand what I mean by a false entrance. There we go, false entrance, false portal. Right, so deliberately,
it does look like Tinkinswood, doesn't it?
Hence why Cotswold 7, but it's like, these people didn't think. I tell you what, Anne, right, what we'll do, we'll build a Cotswold 7 chamber, right? It just happened to be the thing, and what is happening, if you look at this plan, they basically said, right, we got like 5 burial chambers there, and we've got like a stone circle in the middle. Why don't we just cover it over with earth? Like, and one of the things that I will say, that lots of these are like low lying, you've got to sort of crouch down to go into them. But the one at Mice Howe on Orkney, that was rather interesting, because what we did, you had to more or less get on your hands and knees, and alongside you was this long length of stone on the left and the right. And it may have been cobbled above us, I'm not sure, but may have been a long stone. And basically what it was is, initially some of these sites were actually stone circles. So the stone circles actually predated the barrow. So that means that some of the dates for our stone circles are out, because if they predate the barrows, then they're a lot older. So anyway, all this type of stuff, some of the barrows are later, earlier, and all the rest of it. But what we're trying to say is that lots of things are going on at the same time. So what we've got is, interesting enough, the dimensions of this are 54 meters long. So it's actually quite small, to be honest with you, compared to West Kennet Long Barrow, which is 100 meters in length. Mind you, if you compare it with Tinkinswood, this is massive, and 18 meters wide, and basically the height of it is just under 5 meters. It may have actually been taller at one stage. Now, this is one of those sites that it was definitely covered in earth. My bugbear, was it actually covered in earth? But this was actually covered in earth. However, it's been monkeyed about with, right? So it's been monkeyed about with. So what we're going to mention is this sort of this thing. Again, we'll mention about the excavation, and then we'll go off and do whatever else we're meant to do. So the false entrance itself, there at the front, it's basically, you've got dry stone walling, and the false entrance at the front, limestone jambs and lintels is in fact the false one. So what they did, so if we go back off this now, but there it is, Mum's Your Monkey. It's actually quite ornate at the front there, but you've got to be very wary of the left and the right there, of how much of that is actually original, because there was some scaraduggery and a little bit of reconstruction, but the middle stuff is actually real. It's rather interesting, this, because it drags people into it to think, oh, that's where the burial is, so we're going to go in there. But the weird thing was, this may have been to deter robbers, although little in the way of value would have been obtained, and secondly, nobody broke into it. So you're thinking, right, all right. So this is sort of the subterfuge, maybe subterfuge, but it's not working as subterfuge because nobody's bothered in breaking into it. So was it actually to deter robbers? Do you see the point I'm trying to make? Is if you're trying to deter robbers, then they would have ripped that stone away. But if it's not there to deter robbers, what's it for? And alternately, is this idea of the spirit door, intended to allow the dead to come and go and partake of offerings brought to the tomb by their descendants. Now, if you read some of the work of J.R.R. Tolkien in the Lord of the Rings, I think the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring, when it goes to when they actually go to the place of the dwarves under the mountain, they try to find a stone. They try to find a doorway, and they can't find it, and because it is solid rock, right? And then Gandalf goes up and says in Elven a spell, and suddenly a door appears in the solid rock, right? This is that solid rock. So J.R.R. Tolkien took lots of his inspiration from being a classical a lecturer, a classical learned man, and he put that into his book. So Spirit Door, and this idea, the idea, again, this thing that I come with lots of different things when we look at the Neolithic period, and obviously the Mesolithic, which we've already done, and obviously any research that Henry does for next week, that'd be really useful. Get those links over to me. This sort of this sense of solid being non-permanent, and the sense of non-solid being permanent. What we mean by that, you can have wood that is erected that rots away, goes into the soil. Stone that's always there, it's not permanent because it's like it can be moved around with and altered and so on and so on. Where permanence, you can see the upside down world of the Neolithic, a doorway that's solid, but ancestors can open it. You can see the link with Lord of the Rings there. So burial chambers, this itself, when we actually go to the plan of this site at Belus Nap, and I told you it would be rather interesting. Where's that little plan again? Let's go. Oh, there's the plan. We want that. And obviously, as we discuss some of these other things, and I think this is, hang on a minute. This might be, this is one of the ones on the side, I think. I'm not exactly sure which one. And that's actually inside there. So we're looking at the arrangements inside. We're seeing all these different stones inside, all this sort of relationship and sort of thing. But you'll understand my little bit of anger in that some parts of the reconstruction, but I'm going to get over it tonight, because it didn't always look like this 150 years ago. But shut up, Carl, get into it. Let's go back to the plan there of Belus Nap. And the actual burial chambers are down the long east and west side of the barrow and at its southern foot. There are 4 burial chambers, 2 on opposite sides near the middle, 1 at the southeast angle and 1 at the south end, as you can see. These are formed of upright stone slabs linked by dry stone walling and originally had corbelled roofs. That word originally had corbelled roofs is a clue to the fact that when they sort of worked here and when they rebuilt it and all the rest of it, the corbelled roofs were gone, right? Somebody asked me a really interesting question yesterday, and they said, when you go into these types of sites, when you sort of go into this type of site, did it always look like this? And the answer is no, as you can see, right? And simply because English heritage have to juggle, Scottish heritage does this, Cadw just completely does this, but lots of these organizations, they basically say, right, particularly with sort of Scottish heritage, if we're going to get footfall, how do we get members of the public in there? And we've got to think about the members of public safety. Do we raise the level of it from the original? Do we actually reconstruct it? How do we reconstruct it? How do we do this and that? So lots of these sites that we actually do see are not actually what they look like when they originally excavated. You can think that that's right or wrong. I sometimes go against the grain and say it's wrong, but that's me. You know me by now. Anyway, so back to this again. So In the 1863-1865 excavations, the skeletal remains of 5 children aged between 6 months and 8 years, and the skull of a young adult male, horse and pig bones and fragments of pottery and flint blades were found among the rubble blocking the false entrance. And if you want to go back to Bateman, can you see what I've just said there? Right, you just seen what I've seen, what we've just mentioned there. This thing about smaller skulls, surely this goes against what Bateman said, right? However, Bateman is unaware of this because this is 1863, 1865, 4 years after the death of Bateman. The passages leading to the chambers were roughly blocked with stones and clay. The other passages there, these passages, there we go. And the lintels and much of the dry walling were rebuilt on the original lines in 1863, 1865, when the barrow was first explored. Now, am I going to get over this and think, right, okay, we'll just allow them to do reconstruction now, right? Well, I'm going to leave that there because it's not nearly as bad as Newgrange, right? After the 1928-1931 work, the walling was secured. 3 of the chambers were covered and the contour of the mound restored. I'm going to get over this as well. Okay, it was covered in earth, right? Fingers crossed. Excavations in 1963 found the remains of 38 human skeletons, together with animal bones, statue of Lloyd George, flint implements, and pottery of the end of the Neolithic period. So what we're talking about is that lots of the evidence that we're seeing relate to the end of the Neolithic period. These burials, however, occurred over a long period of time, and it may be that none date to the time when the mound was built.
Did you say 60 burials?
We've got 38 burials in the work in 1963.
Oh, right.
38 burials, but if you want to put that, that's about 50 odd altogether, isn't it? So we got 5. No, it's not. It's just well under that. But
Yeah.
anyway, 38 in 1963. But anyway, the line there, none date to the time when the mound was built. I keep telling you that what we find in regards to these types of sites, that when they were originally built, they were not burial chambers. And now we've got 5 people online. Hello, everybody. They were not burial chambers. This is what the Professor Colin Richards believes at the University of Highlands and Islands. They were not initially burial chambers. So most of the evidence from these sites date to the end of their use. Somebody's mentioned online, good evening, Carl, messaging from a lay-by, listening in whilst driving. Very interesting as always, and opening my mind to look at the interpretation of sites with an open mind. So in other words, guys, people are listening to this driving lorries. Thank you, David. I'm getting out and about. I'm quite chuffed with that. So the thing is, you know, when we think about the Neolithic period, what we've really got to do, we've really got to think about the Neolithic period as opening our mind. Their minds were very open. Their minds were very expansive, and we've really got to see that, and we've really got to understand that in the genre of this. Remember, the Neolithic period itself, and we've got Pazu. Hi, the Neolithic period itself is a period that lasted from 8,000 years ago to around 4,500 years ago. So it's a massive length of time, 3,500 years if you go by my dating system, and a lot is going on in that period. You've got Silbury Hill, you've got these types of monuments, you've got Kirkus monuments, you've got avenues, you've got Stonehenge, you've got the occupational sites that we've seen in Ireland, you've got causewayed enclosures, which we will mention at the end, only at the end. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to the other images that we actually had, and what we do have is this next site. And what I'm going to say to people online is, don't forget to press the blue button at the bottom to join. Help me with my work. So anyway, so basically what I'd like to say now is subscribe and like online as well. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at this site, which is in fact something that we looked at last week, because I wanted to. We've just done Bellas Nap now, so there's our Bellas Nap, and again these types of round barrows. But now we're looking at this site. This is in fact the kist on White Horse Hill. And we mentioned this was in Dartmoor, and it's an interesting site. It was a site that was not buggered up by antiquarians in the 1900s. In fact, it was discovered really recently, and it was thought that nothing was in it. How wrong would they be? Woo! Basically, this is what's known as a hag on Dartmoor. Not a hag, not an old hag. Some of the women I date these days. However, this hag itself is a little mound, and this itself is on Dartmoor, the name for a mound. And they actually thought this was empty. They thought it was actually interfered with by people in the sometime in the 1900s. But it wasn't. It was full. It had all its original archaeology, which is absolutely amazing. And this monument itself is part of a monument in an upland area of Dartmoor, on White Horse Hill, that in the Bronze Age we can move on to the Bronze Age a little bit. Obviously, we're doing a neolithic, it's sort of transitional thing anyway. So in the Bronze Age, this was an environment that had trees, agriculture, people living, burial mounds. And after the collapse of the Bronze Age in 1628 years BC, the big collapse in the Bronze Age, what happened was that people abandoned this landscape. They abandoned everything. You get houses up there abandoned in the Bronze Age. You get barrow fields of burials abandoned in the Bronze Age. Agriculture abandoned in the Bronze Age. This itself is a wonderful monument indeed, a massively wonderful monument indeed. So what you can see is this itself was excavated in 2011. It's as new a barrow on Dartmoor as you're going to get at White Horse Hill. The side stones are in a varying state of collapse with the capstone on top. But basically, the capstone, the weight of the capstone, they thought, right, everything's gone. It's gone. Nothing survived. Right. How wrong would we be? Look at that. Human remains and the remains of a bear skin. I kid you not. It was one of those classic moments, end of the day moments, that they were excavating this. And on the last but one day on the site, we were taking out a spit of peat from within this kist, right? They were taking some of the peat out, right? And out popped a shale bead. My God, a shale bead. They got more archaeology than they thought straight away. But you can see there's more than one bead there, right? And they thought, right. Then they looked a little bit closer. You can see on the screen, what's the white stuff? It's human remains. What's the other stuff? It's a bloody bear skin. So in other words, this is my experience of archaeology. Usually on the last day or within the last 2 days of an excavation, the archaeology is usually the stuff found. So what they did, they didn't excavate the archaeology. They didn't actually excavate the archaeology there. What they did, they actually took the whole block of peat out and all the contents, slid a metal plate underneath it into the peat, right? And they basically, what they did, they decided it would be best not to dig it in the field, so we cut it out and wrapped it in cling film and excavated it in a laboratory in Chippenham. We didn't, and they had no idea. They had no idea that underneath that bead would be beads, and they had no idea that there'd be a bloody bear skin. So what they did a micro excavation in a laboratory, the best place to do it. It's like you guys now. You're not having to be in a room with me, having cups of tea, being poisoned, right? And so you're in the safety of your homes, you're in the safety of archaeological excavation at home now. This painstaking approach to investigating the cyst in both the laboratory and the field has paid dividends. Not only did it reveal grave goods that are unparalleled for a Dartmoor kist, but it also demonstrated the degree of deliberation that went into the burial. In other words, they had one of the only complete burials of this type excavated anywhere in Britain. In fact, I've never come across the remains of a bear skin being excavated in Britain. I'm sure, no doubt, Henry will find 50 examples in Ireland, but I've never come across this. Right, I've never come across this. And so what they did, you know, this itself, the whole thing, the whole thing itself. If we want to talk about how this was originally built, the original builders, what they did, they cut into the soil, which was unlikely the type of peat that you've got today. They cut into the soil. They planned it really well. And this was basically associated with a natural outcrop, so it could be seen. And they used tapered stones. And this was a whopping capstone on top. And thanks to the laboratory excavations, we know that the date is roughly sometime around 1,700 years BC. So approximately before the climatic collapse in Britain. The contents that they found, there's just go with the flow on what I'm looking at. What we believe is, while the contents of the kist point to the ceremony being conducted between August and September. So they put the stuff in there in August and September. And they worked out the position of the dating by what was on the base, what was underneath this. They basically, they found grasses, you know, moor grasses, long grasses, purple moor grasses, and so on, which would have only been laid later on in the season, not early in the season. I know that as a fact because here I've got sheep grazing and the grass hasn't grown yet. It's still the way it was in January, right? But I do know that the grasses here will be growing about 1 foot, 2 feet high in about 2 months' time. And by about August, it's about 1 meter in height. So they know from the evidence that this itself was finalized by at least September. We know from looking at the stems very closely under the microscope in the presence of pollen from meadowsweet flowers that they were picked in late summer, early autumn. So, or in other words, the end of their summer season. So we're talking about sort of no later than September. So basically, and no earlier than August. So, or the mid part of August. So what they found, interestingly enough, a nettle, an animal skin, that they think was some kind of a band or a sash placed over the grass. And then on top of that, what they then placed was a bear skin, a bear pelt containing the cremations. In other words, what you've got is a complete revelation of archaeology at this wonderful site at Dartmoor. And one thing that I would say is that, you know, you guys all know I'm as mad as a box of frogs. But however, when it comes to burials of animals, I really go into it. So I dig a hole, right? Any weather, right? I usually take the deceased animal over. I pick some grass and lay the grass in there. Occasionally I might put some corn or some sort of food in with it, right, as a libation. I then put the animal in there. I talk to the animal, and then on top of that I put grasses, and then on top of that I put some of the soil, and then on top of that I put a grave mark, and then on top of that I put the sod of earth. And that's not much different from what they were doing with the human remains back in the day, right? My little way of remembering that animal. Placed beside the pelt was a basket containing a bead necklace. So in other words, that's basically more or less on top, sort of beside, sort of as this sort of collapses, it just gets a bit disarticulated. And there was a flint flake and 2 wooden studs. These have been made on a lathe And the final object was a pin, which I haven't got an image of, but a pin was placed into position to sort of fix the pelt together, sort of, you know, keep it sort of upright. So what clearly the description of this is something that I need to give you. So the cremated bone and bearskin pelt from White Horse Hill, as we sort of go into this itself, the description of this is the studded cattle hair bracelet shown in situ. So in other words, you can actually see the bracelet there. You can actually see the bracelet actually on the screen there, along with all the other archaeology. I tell you what, right? This is absolutely amazing. So you can see the hair bracelet in front of you. Just think about that. That has survived 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,700 years. So the individual laid to rest on White Horse Hill, looking at the cremated remains, right? Was a youngster, no older than 25 years old, and they say that they can't really determine the sex. Unfortunately, a male archaeologist, except a female archaeologist, analysed this. But I would say, you know, because we found this here, which is a necklace, and because we found these things, this is obviously meaning that it was probably female. But I'm not going to go with it. I'm just going to let's just presume it's anybody, right? Weighing the remains within the pelt suggests that only half, in fact, what they found was that only half of the bone that they felt was present was actually found. The person wasn't actually cremated here at all. They were cremated somewhere else. So they only collected some of the bones up from a burial pyre somewhere else. And the other thing as well is it was placed on a burial pyre somewhere else because that's where the wood was. Right at this stage, even though there's some trees around, there wouldn't have been enough wood to burn a human body. As you know from some of my lectures, to burn a human body, you need quite a lot of good timber to burn a human body, and that's what you're not going to find that on the top of Dartmoor where this body is. So they burnt the body somewhere else in the pyre, and basically what you've got is classically here that the bones are placed into something, i.e. The pelt, the skin of a bear, and this is then brought to the site. So, you know, when we think about some of the wonderful grave goods themselves, they're basically an eye opener, because we never get this type of archaeology on any other site. It's just to give you an idea of the type of material found. What they found there's a link with Cornwall because they found a tin bead. There's a link with the North Sea and sort of Kent because they found amber beads, which would have been collected from amber, which would have been washed up on the beaches there. You're not going to find that in rivers. They found 92 shale beads, which would have actually come from the coast of Southampton, the north of the Isle of Wight. And they found 109 clay beads, which would have been naturally created within the landscape. A chunky tin bead may well have been at the center of the arrangement. A tin bead, not bronze, not copper, but a tin bead. Both the amber and the shale would have traveled to this site from a distance, and maybe the shale, which comes from Dorset, may have traveled up to 130 kilometers to get to the site. So this indicates a massive sense of trade. And the other thing as well is about the amber beads. They're not exactly the best amber beads. They've been worn. They're exotic. They're a family heirloom. So tin also featured on a studded cattle hair bracelet, which is there in front of us. And obviously, it is far less obvious how the mysterious remains actually got on into the site in the first place. So these, now the next thing that we've got, these wooden studs. Now these are rather interesting. These have actually been these wooden studs have been created on a lathe, right? Now there's one thing that we know. This is some of the earliest examples of lathing anywhere on the planet, because we know that wood was created on lathes in ancient Egypt around 1,500 years BC, but that's 200 years later than this. And we had a little bit of a joke yesterday. We said, well, what we're going to do, civilization has moved from the north to the south, and the Egyptians have learned lathing from somebody from Britain. But this is the thing, you know, people had this technology in different parts of the world, and it's just evolved and so on. So the general style, it's thought that these might actually be for body piercings, earlobes or lip lobes or nose lobes. Not that I'd ever want to put one of these on my body anywhere. Indeed, this technique, this evidence is so unique. It really makes you think outside the box. It really makes you think, well, they had these things. This is the first time we've come across these things. How many more of these things? You know, this one burial, right? This one single burial in Dartmoor, if you just think of Dartmoor, this is the only one surviving intact out of tens of thousands of barrows on Dartmoor. So the chances of finding anything like this again is very remote, but you never know. And the other thing as well is what we've got, they actually found the remains of a lime tree basket. So basically what they did, they got lime bark, they stripped the lime bark at the right time of year, they immersed it in water to make it supple, to manipulate it. A lime basket would have been fairly waterproof, would have been something really useful for storing water and liquids on this Dartmoor landscape, which would have been very important. This is a site that they excavated. So why was this young person buried at this location? There's obviously evidence of a settlement nearby that hasn't been found. It's much more, you know, there's argument that this may have been somebody who'd ended up here because they were part of a community that moved around a little bit. But I feel that this is more connected with a much wider landscape that we don't really understand, because this is the only one that actually survives. The radiocarbon dating hints that the cremation could have taken place several decades before the pear pelt was skinned. In other words, the human remains of this person may have been carried around for generations. This was a very important person. Think about that. Let's just read this whole passage, right? And it is possible that the person's death did not fortuitously coincide with the turning of the seasons, and that it had occurred sometime previous, generations previous, maybe. So in other words, the pelt itself has been dated to closer to when this little sort of barrow was created, but the human remains date from earlier than the bearskin pelt, right? Ultimately, though, the manner in which they were interred would change the perceptions of this world of Dartmoor. There has been a tendency to see burials in the southwest as poor cousins of those in Wessex and elsewhere in Britain. But however, this is now the remains of somebody that had a world within the Dartmoor landscape. We're not going to say that this person was a king or a leader or a special person. There were tens of thousands of special people within Dartmoor, however, over a long period of time. But this person represents only one of a moment in time. So what we've found is that the old picture of these people is wrong, and now we know that these people with their tin, with their studs, with the pelt, with the skill to be able to cremate somebody, with the necklace of amber, with the necklace with shale associated, with little brooch-like things, with pins and all sorts of things. This is an organic landscape of archaeology that is only the tip of the iceberg for everything that we could learn and know about. And there might be more of these. There no doubt might be more. So that's the end of part 3 of this lecture. And I haven't stopped talking. And what I might do is I might grab a cup of tea Right, so anyone watching online, we're going to have a 3-minute break for as long as a kettle takes to boil. So we're going to have a 3-minute break and then we're going to come back. I don't want to go on for another hour tonight, but what I want us to do is have a little bit of a break. So a 3-minute break, go and put your kettle on, 3 minutes, and we'll be back. I'll speak to you then. Go on, Anne, tell them about that washing machine. Do you know what, guys? Right, I used to know this woman who used to sit on a washing machine and she used to have orgasms.
And we got to turn the volume on.
No, I bloody didn't. That was deliberate. Right. I don't want to have a coffee because I'll be a bit more nuts. So there we go. God, I was accused of being racist the other day when I said to a magistrate, "You're English, you should get back to England." I didn't think that worked.
I was going to say I wasn't on. I was on mute. But when our washing machine was broke, what we did do was we bought a spinner, like a camping spinner, and it cost us about £70 from Amazon. But I tell you what, it's really good. My husband uses it all the time. It's much better than no one can hear me.
Yeah, yes, we can. Goff has gone off. Henry's on another planet.
No one
Richard's
can hear
listening.
me. They're all on mute. Oh,
Are they? Oh no, Richard's listening.
Richard's on mute.
The only
Richard-
reason why Richard does this is the entertainment value. We got 5 people online watching at this minute. The 5 people online, we're having a little bit of a tea break. So we're just don't forget, people online, to like and subscribe. But if you press the blue button, join, right? You can get extras on YouTube, which are £1.99 a month or £9.99 a month. If you press the blue button, all the money helps. It helps me find new tea bags.
Right. Are you sure that's not us? It's online. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 people.
No,
online.
there's 5 people on YouTube.
Oh, right. Anyway, it's really good, this spin dryer. He hand washes his clothes and uses a spin dryer. I think he's waiting for me to go, preparing for me to go. Because he wants to be independent without his washing machine. Oh, I mean, he can use the washing machine, but he doesn't really want to think about anybody else's washing.
Do you know, Anne, can I just make a comment, right? If anyone's bloody watching this, right, the title is not Washing Machines Through the Ages. Do you know what? We actually did have a lecture about washing machines through the ages.
Oh, I'm sure they had, they washed in the rivers, didn't they? And they had stones and bashed the clothes with the stones, and
Yeah,
their way.
That's true. That's true.
I probably didn't bother washing clothes because they were animal skins.
Richard wanders around in an animal skin at night. Yeah, he does. Anyone watching online, we're going to be back in a moment. I'm just doing my cup of tea. Here we are. I've even got a pot noodle I did earlier on.
Yeah.
I love pot noodle. Yeah, I've got to put some more hot water on it. And a partridge in a pear tree on the 5th. And are you looking forward to Christmas?
Oh, well, no, I'm looking forward to the summer. Well, when we have a long stretch of sunshine.
Right, okay then, folks. We're gonna get back to the lecture now. We're gonna stir my tea, right? And we're gonna get back to the Gibb brothers who found Otzi the Iceman, right? So let's get back to it. Right, and I hope Goff had a nice cup of tea then. So what we're going to do, we're going to get back to the Gibb brothers. And here we go. And let's just get in with it. Right, okay, I've got to remember what I'm doing. Share the screen. Yeah, On a more serious note, this is me being serious for once. I actually thought about having a memorial celebration lecture for good old Dennis, because we couldn't have it in the pandemic, but it'll just be you and me, Goff.
Yeah.
What?
No, 'cause Goff is the only Lantwick major person I got left.
Oh, right. Oh, I see.
So Jill would probably be interested, I think. So right, okay. So anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to do Otzi the Iceman now. And as this is Otzi the Iceman Part 2, there's the Gibb brothers, and what I want to do today is what I did on what I did on oh god, can't get my bloody words out. What I did on Tuesday. I basically said what I wanted to do is a little bit of Otzi the Iceman today, and we'll do a little bit more of Otzi the Iceman in the future. Because it's just so much about Otzi the Iceman, which is new, rewriting the history of the Otzi the Iceman. So we've got three little elements of Otzi the Iceman that we're going to do. So what we're going to do, get us up to speed again, a little bit more on Otzi the Iceman. As we know, he was found in the Tyrol. He was thought to be believed on the Austrian side of the Ötztal Alps, but turned out to be on the Italian side, dating from somewhere around as 5,350 years ago. Otzi the Iceman falls in the Copper Age of Europe, but is at the same time when we're doing the Neolithic. So this is why I'm doing it, Otzi the Iceman. And there's lots of wonderful comparison things with Otzi the Iceman. So basically, what I basically thought is the guy who's in the pink Barry Gibb looking outfit. This is in 1991. This is Hans Kammerlanderanga, and this is Reinhold Messner. And these are basically mountaineers who visit Otzi the Iceman as he's still lay in the ice after it was discovered on the 19th of September 1991 by two German tourists. And look at them. They're just like, oh wow, it's a body. We'll just try and get it out with ice picks and all the rest of it. And between the 19th of September and the 22nd of September, it was visited by probably 100 people, right, who had prodded and kicked at it and nicked things and gone away and whatever. And eventually they managed to get the body out. And the weirdest thing is, they didn't know it was an old body until like 4 days in. And I'm thinking, well, so if it was an old body, you would have treated it with some respect. So because it was a fairly new body, you thought you could just move it around and stuff. We don't really know exactly where it was found, because at this stage, people had done all sorts with it. So we've talked about the border dispute. We've mentioned about we've mentioned a few things about the body, but one thing that I will say will lead us on to the teeth. Current estimates is that Otzi the Iceman was 5 foot 3 inches tall, and originally weighed 110 pounds. I wish people would do this in stone, because I've no idea what 110 pounds is. We know he's about 45 years old, but when they had removed the body from the ice, because what ice does, it takes moisture out your body, doesn't it? It was 30 pounds rather than 110 it was estimated to originally been. The body had deteriorated. Some people believe that the body had actually deteriorated because of where it was exposed. But we're now starting to think something else, which we'll go on to. I want to do that in detail. And if we don't manage to do the other two bits of the lecture today, then we'll do them next week. Okay. So it was because the body was so mucked around with, and I'm going to say this with a serious tone. They thought his penis had been nicked and his scrotum had been purloined by one of the tourists. They actually thought that. But eventually, examining the body, they did actually find the guy's penis and his scrotum. So that was good. I feel but these types of things happen. You allow tourists to muck around in the body. They take things, right? So what we do know more scientifically is analysis of pollen, dust grains, and the isotopic composition. The dust grains is very important, so we'll come on to that a little bit later. We know that he moved around in about 50 kilometers of where the body was found. Now, what we want to do is we want to go to his teeth, right? And what they've done, they've high resolution X-rayed and photogrammetry and all the rest of it, all the techniques that they actually use to do this. And what we're going to do is look inside his mouth, right? So the description of what we're talking about inside his mouth is a lot more than the images that we're looking at, but we'll keep these images with us, right? So if you that sort of little thing there in front on the left hand side is not what they've done. That's somehow sort of that's an image with a closer image of the hole that you're seeing. And anyway, but that's what that is. So right, anyway, so let's get into this now. And what we're going to do is we're going to do periodontal problems with the teeth. For the first time, researchers, this is in 2013 and since, have been able to provide evidence of periodontism, periodontal disease, tooth decay, accidental related dental damage in the ice mummy Otzi. The latest scientific findings provide interesting information on the dietary patterns of the Neolithic Iceman and on the evolution of the medically significant oral pathologies. Now, we're loving those words there. Some of this might be glazed over your head, but it is naturally useful. And what I didn't want to do is a 2-hour lecture about Otzi the Iceman and say, oh, by the way, this is the way he was killed. That's 20 minutes. Let's look at his teeth, another 20 minutes. Let's look at his bowels, another 20 minutes. I just wanted to do this over a few weeks. And this is how I'm doing my lectures now, dipping in, dipping out. And it seems to be working. So a bit more about Otzi, I think, in 2 weeks, actually. So the Neolithic mummy Otzi, as we know, dating, the dates always vary with Otzi the Iceman. So this source is saying 5,300 years ago, displays an astonishing large number of oral diseases and dental problems that are still widespread today. So Otzi the Iceman has got all the problems that we've got today. And also, if you look at the molars, the two on the left and the right, you can actually see that they're worn away. This is molars worn away. They're very worn away.
Cavities, they have worn away.
They've worn away. They've worn away. So what we've got is that when they looked at the teeth, lots of abrasions. There was carious lesions, which are holes in the teeth. You've got some severe sort of opening up. My teeth, if you looked at my teeth today, right, my teeth are in a far worse state than this guy, and we're the same age, more or less. He had mechanical trauma to one of his front teeth, which was probably due to an accident. So, and what you can see is that there's a bit of a cleft lip sort of on the bottom. This is the lower mandible rather than the upper. So when we say a cleft lip, we say the teeth dividing. This is not a cleft lip problem, but you can see a space. Well, you can see a space. So some damage is caused there. Although research has been underway on this important mummy for over 20 years, the teeth had scarcely been examined, and lots of what Otzi is hasn't been examined. Right, the loss of the periodontal dontism has always been a very common disease. So loss of teeth, tooth tissue, periodontal disease eating away at your tooth tissue. We see this associated with mummies in Egypt. Some of the teeth with mummies in Egypt are really bad, but what Otzi allows us an especially good insight into stages of various diseases over time. Advanced periodontal disease, the 3-dimensional computer tomography reconstructions give us an insight into the oral world of of this Otzi the Iceman, particularly in the area of the rear molars. You can clearly see that they're really being worn down. And on the basically, particularly in the area of the rear molars, it's found that the periodontal supporting tissue that almost extended to the tip of the root. There you can see. So all that sort of other material, the tooth is being eaten away. Periodontal disease. You can see there that you've got disease really hitting into the roots of this individual. Was he in a lot of pain? Well, I'm going to tell you something that I may have mentioned before, but I didn't really go into much detail. When I was a child of around the age of about 7 years old, my brother threw a stone at my face. Right, it smashed all my front teeth, so they were reconstructed. This was on a Friday. I had a severe brainal abscess in the upper mandible, which was just about to erupt, which I would meant that if it had erupted, I'd be dead. Right. So, disease, it really spread fast in my teeth. Right. So to save my teeth, all my teeth, they basically, they cut all the nerve endings for all my teeth. So when I actually get any problems with my teeth, right, I don't feel it. So I've got so much tooth decay in my teeth, right? My teeth are just melting, and that's happened, right? So I've got no idea what the pain is that this guy's got with his teeth. So I can't really, when people say they got teeth problems, I just look at them and say, well, I can't have it. It doesn't happen with me. So the fact that the Iceman suffered from tooth decay is attributable to eating more and more starchy foods such as bread and cereal porridge, which were more common in the Neolithic period because there's a rise in agriculture. So today we talk about sugar. I've eaten a lot of sugar in my life, so it's completely smashed my teeth. Right. This guy had the other thing that he ate a lot of cereal, and also bread and cereal has actually natural sugars, so that's going to affect the teeth. In addition, the food was very abrasive. When they're grinding it down, there's a lot of grit and stuff in as they're grinding, so that's rubbing off, so that's abrading his teeth. His accidental dental damage and his other injuries testified to his troubled life at the time. But everyone would have been in the same boat. So one front tooth has suffered mechanical trauma. The discoloration is still clearly visible, and one molar has lost a whole cusp. Oh my frigging God! Has lost a cusp. Probably from chewing on something, perhaps a small stone. Oh God, please help. So in other words, that gives you a little bit of an overview with his teeth. I know it's 9 o'clock now, so what I am going to do, I'm not going to call it yet, but I'm going to call it after the next bit. Right. One of the questions was about Otzi the Iceman. What actually happened to him? Right. And the other week when we looked at Otzi the Iceman, we had this image, and I said this is wrong because we've actually got some clothing. We've actually got skins and stuff that he actually wore. You know, he wore a hat. You know, he looked, well, maybe he didn't look like that. But this guy had a hat, right? Okay, we'll go back to this one, right? He looked more like this probably, but he would have kept himself warm like anybody else. And he would have had decent footwear with insulation, unlike these absolute mountain climber numpties that have got trainers on. Who goes up to the Tyrol, right, with trainers on? And these are mountain climbers, flipping heck. So, this guy, we know that this guy had insulated boots on. We know he had insulation. We'll do all that again. I think he had sort of grasses and stuff and mosses and all sorts of things. He had insulated boots, right? So, okay, what I want to do now is I want us to, again, looking into the eyes of Otzi, right? There he is. There he's taken out the fridge. He's in this sort of this sort of oh God, I can't get my words out. He's in a refrigerator. Yeah, he's in a refrigerator anyway, right? It's always said he had the arm across his face because he was trying to protect himself with a cloak. It's almost like a vampire type thing. He's protecting himself from a cloak. So anyway, if we go on to this now and we sort of and we look there and we go there, right? So this last bit of the story today, and I might actually do I might do it all, right? It's not a massive piece, but I'm going to read out this whole thing. It's not big. This is from the Smithsonian magazine, right? And it starts off by telling us about Otzi the Iceman. And it said back in the time of 1991, researchers assumed that the find was an unusual one-off, the result of a perfect storm of weather and climate conditions that just so happened to come together to preserve the body. Essentially, they thought it was a happy accident. And somebody's put online now, Elise, no one wears trainers for that. Wet feet will ruin a nice hike or climb. Yeah, well, exactly. Who were these mountain climbers? But in other words, Otzi the Iceman had better boots on. But what we've got to do is talk about what happened to Otzi. We don't answer why was he chased up there? Was he already injured? But we've got some of those sort of things. New research suggests otherwise. And as global temperatures rise, this Smithsonian says because they're woke because of human-caused climate change. Well, you know my opinion on that. And ice melts around the world. More historic bodies and other artifacts are likely to surface, according to new paper published in this week. When archaeologists first began to ponder the conditions that preserved Otzi, one prevailing theory went like this. Okay, let's do it. And get your brain working. Late in the year, the Iceman was running away from someone or something, possibly a conflict, and decided to hide out in the mountains. He ultimately died there and quickly became buried in winter snow. Otzi fell into a shallow gully, which protected him from the movement of glaciers. Then, not long after, the climate evolved and temperatures dropped for hundreds of years, encasing his body in ice. He remained that way until September 1991. Scientists agreed when the snow and ice began to melt away and reveal part of his body. Right, okay, fair enough. Right, so, okay, we'll just leave it there. We're not going to leave it there because the general understanding was that Otzi marked this beginning of a cooler period, as people were sure that he must have been within the ice without interruption since his death. Says an expert, Matthias Huss, a glaciologist from Zurich, who was not involved in this new paper. Now, however, archaeologists believe there wasn't so much serendipity involved. In other words, this might not be unique. Some 30 years after the discovery of Otzi, some researchers decided to take a fresh look at the evidence, and that led them to a new theory. Let's do it, babes. Based on radiocarbon dating and other analysis of the leaves, seeds, moss, grass, and dung found near his body, they believe Otzi actually died in the spring rather than the fall, which means his corpse was exposed during the summer. And because some of these organic materials were found to be younger than Otzi, the team proposes that the site was open to the air on multiple occasions during the last 5,300 years. So in other words, there may have been other occasions where people may have seen the body over the past 5,300 years. It's unlikely, okay? It's really unlikely. However, it means that the body may not be the same person that owned all the objects found there. So in other words, the body was found with other paraphernalia that may have been dropped and deposited there by other people over different times. So in other words, what we find with Otzi is everything. We find bow and arrow, statues of Lloyd George, we find a quiver, we find a cloak, we find a shirt, we find boots, we find this, we find that, we find everything, right? It might not have all belonged to Otzi. This all points to a different story, that Otzi was regularly exposed to the elements, not cocooned in an iron-clad frozen time capsule. I know you guys are thinking, how therefore is the body so well preserved? It's bloody cold, right? And there's no bacteria and things up there that are going to eat away the body at those bloody temperatures anyway. There might have been a snow cat or a bloody rabbit, but rabbits don't eat human bodies. They actually found fecal matter. Did that fecal matter actually belong to Otzi, or could it belong to another person? All of these questions are now starting to come out. They also now believe that Otzi died somewhere other than the gully where he was discovered. So in other words, these people buggering about with the body, it may have not have been there wherever they found him anyway. And if you look at this image, it's a slightly different location from this image, right? You know, it's been mucked around with. So in other words, it doesn't matter anyway. It does matter. They shouldn't have buggered around with the body in the first place. But the point is that what I'm trying to get at is that the body had moved over time anyway. Archaeologists found his damaged belongings dispersed around the site, which suggests that he died at a higher elevation and that sometime later, spring and summer, runoff or shifting ice likely pushed his body into the gully. Or maybe somebody had placed him there. Oh, what did I just say? The big test is to imagine that Otzi was found today. All right, let's find him today, right? And you're dead, right? We're going to put you up there. An archaeologist with a program in Norway says as follows in Science Norway: with everything we now know about how glacial archaeological localities work, would anybody have come up with this theory? The answer to that is no, right? We don't need the string of miracles. Otzi was preserved by regular natural processes. So in other words, what we're trying to get at is that there's a lot going on with there's more going on with Otzi than meets the eye, really. Indeed, since Otzi's discovery, archaeologists have discovered lots of other things at other sites, other human bodies, horse remains, skis, hunting gear, other historical artifacts in melting glaciers, and bodies associated with the First World War. Though in the early 1990s, researchers assumed Otzi's preservation was a fluke, that now seems not to be the case. So there might be another Otzi. Woo! You can actually look through at Otzi through a fridge at the Tyrol Museum of Archaeology. Taken together, these new conclusions go against the long-held belief that Otzi's death marked the beginning of a long-lasting cold era of the climate. In addition, as ice continues to melt as a result of global warming, the findings suggest hikers and researchers may want to keep their eyes peeled for even more remarkable finds, more remarkable than Otzi, even an earlier body. Oh, really? Oh, let's look out for this. Hopefully on the Austrian side of the border this time, because you know the Italians have got this one. I'm sure Mussolini would be okay with that. The fine circumstances of Otzi are quite normal for glacial archaeology. In other words, the researchers write in the paper, the chances of finding another prehistoric human body in a similar topographical setting should therefore be higher than previously believed, since a string of special circumstances is not needed for the preservation of this type of find, and relevant locations are now affected by heavy melt events. More of these bodies might be found. So in other words, when you look at the body and you think moved around, it's been moved around over time. Did he look like this? Is everything there that he had? He definitely didn't look like this. Don't want to do that one. That looks like, hang on a minute, where are we? That looks like Anne's husband, Joe. But this guy is more, did he look like this? Did he have all that paraphernalia on? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Some of the things may have been placed there by somebody else. And the other thing as well is that we got to think about this, and this isn't in any of the reading. Maybe he was at a regular place where he went to. Maybe this was his thinking place, right? This was his place to die. That would make sense. It really would. You know, it would make sense. And or maybe this was a place that his family, his ancestors went to, or wherever it was. Maybe it was a bit further over there. You know, maybe this is a place that mountain climbers went to in the Neolithic period. How do we know they didn't go mountain climbing? They had better boots than those numpties, the Gibb brothers at the images before. I'm loving this. I'm loving how this is playing out, and obviously more about Otzi the Iceman in the near future. Maybe in about 2 weeks' time. There's Otzi looking, and I got to be honest with you. If you look at his teeth there in the front,
Yeah.
you can actually see there that there is staining in that tooth. That there was some kind of damage with that tooth. It may have been. There's actually. Hang on a minute. I can remember the story somewhere along the line of chewing bark.
Maybe
But
he did
maybe
have a cleft palate
maybe he did.
because he's got that, you
Oh yeah,
know.
actually, and you know the image that we showed you earlier on when I said didn't add this together, did I? That's the lower mandible, isn't it? Or is that the upper? Oh no, that is the upper. Oh, that is the upper. Right, sorry. So that does line up with then what we've got there with the staining associated with his teeth. And actually, Anne, if you look at lots of images of mummies, they do really, really look like this. The teeth, and lots of wear on the teeth, rather than modern modern humans today, which we do have some level of dental care, but I refuse to go to a dentist because I just can't go. I just really can't go to a dentist.
Do you know
The
what?
last time I had an injection, I fainted with the needle in my palate, right? So I won't go with that one. So
I had a
Go on.
60-year-old molar taken out last week.
Oh wow, you could have given it to me, and I'd have drilled into it.
Molar, one of
I could
those,
have,
yeah. Oh God, horrible.
shut up, Anne. It was lovely. Right. So what we're going to do now, if everybody okay time wise, I just wanted to do one last thing. Is that okay? I know you've got to go a minute. Right. Okay. Fine. Scream. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to do something else as well. Two other little things. Right. I know that we've mentioned this before, and somebody mentioned about a Bronze Age European star map, right? Unfortunately, I ended up looking at this, which was a big slab, which was Europe's oldest map, which is a ground map actually. This was found associated with the River Odette in Western France.
Yeah.
And is believed to be in excess of 4,000 years old. Bronze Age, Neolithic, whatever, it's around that time. And there we go. Loving it. In fact, Anne's had a lot of carvings today, haven't we, Richard? We've looked at lots of carvings on stones. This is known as the Belay or Belek slab. And this dates to the Bronze Age, approximately maybe in excess of 4,150 years ago old or earlier. It's definitely Bronze Age, or might be earlier. This was actually found in 1900 in Brittany, right? But they lost it. This is actually nearly 4 meters long. They lost it. It originally made up one of the walls of a kist, a stone box that housed the bodies of the dead. And they found these and they thought, oh, we'll take it out of the ground. Love it. It was used as a burial slab, but it wasn't originally a burial slab. At the time of the discovery, it was actually a broken slab, and it was 4 meters long, and it went to a private museum. And then it was acquired by France's Museum of National Antiquities. However, it was stored in a French castle and wasn't rediscovered until 2014, 90 years later. It's only now that researchers believe that this prehistoric slab is actually a map. Resounding photogrammetry and other analysis tells us that details away from, there's more detail to this. And what they do believe is that this is a detailed map of a river network, of valleys, and all other there's loads of little sort of holes and various other things on this that you can't actually get from this actual image. But if we go to this, all these little holes, do they represent settlements? What do they actually represent? And it's believed that this actually represents an area of just under 19 miles from one end of the slab to the next. They do really believe that this is a map associated with the natural landscape the natural cartographical landscape that is still in that area of Brittany even today. The fact that it was later buried may mean that it may have had powers, and people may have rejected the ability of the people to actually control them by having a map. In other words, a map is a way of control. We know where you live, Anne. We know where you live, Goff. We can knock on your door. We can tell you what to do. We can this and that. So it may have been rejected and buried. We don't really know. But I just wanted to show you this as a little bit of a taster at the end of today. And one other thing as well is the other sites that I've been mentioning is this is White Sheet Hill. This is in England. I keep mentioning what's referred to as causewayed enclosures. And just basically, we're building up to causewayed enclosures in the near future. Causewayed enclosures are found more or less draped on the sides of hillocks, sort of raised areas. They're found across Britain, mainly in the south, but we've now started finding them in Wales. And guess what? If I had reported the material I'd actually found from the site at Healer Mynydd, which is near Ogmore in the Vale of Glamorgan, I would have been the first person to have found a causewayed enclosure anywhere in Wales, and this would have been in 1997. But unfortunately, I didn't report my findings, and I turned up one day to do some more work, and there was a person from the museum saying, "We've found the site." Really resented that, but unfortunately, me and the archaeologist involved, Stephen, we've sort of we've come to an understanding now, so that's fine. So that's good. I've become friends with another person in the National Museum of Wales, so that's good. So that's been laid to rest. But anyway, causewayed enclosures are briefly what they are is an original concentric circle, 4 concentric circles, 5, 6, or whatever. Or what they are is a ditch. You can actually see little ditches with a bank behind. Each of these little ditches represented a family, right? And what we do believe is that the ditch was dug for a family, and then a bank was dug and a spike was placed on that bank and all sorts of things. But I don't want to do any more about causewayed enclosures today. That will take it away. But I wanted to give you an idea what causewayed enclosures are for a future occasion. I was going to do a lot more today. I was going to mention about a copper fishing hook from Ash Kellion, which is in the Middle East. I was going to look at that today, but we won't do that today. We'll do more of the Irish stuff next week. We're looking at next week. We'll be looking at another of the barrow diggers, getting into that, seeing more shenanigans. Anyone watching online, there's 5 people online. So what we're going to do, we're going to keep you online, but my main guys here that actually take part in the class, we're going to ask them if there's got any questions. We've got the chat box as well. Let's look at the chat box. Hi, it's axe-shaped weapon engraved with a tiger pattern plus clouds and birds source in Hishai, in China. So we'll do that next week. We've got that detail. What we are going to do now, I would like to know if any questions from let's see if we've got any questions from Richard, Dickie. 7 people watching online now. So Dickie,
nothing from me, Carl.
Okay.
I've got to go now, actually.
Anyway, Dickie, I'll see you next week. Okay, I'll speak to you next week, Dickie. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Night-night. Right, we've got all 4 of you on the screen. So anyone watching online, the 7 of you, keep online and we'll have a quick chat after this. Right, Goff, anything you'd like to say this week?
No, it's all very lots of interesting things there, things to think about. So thanks very much for that, Cal.
Many, many thanks, Goff. It's always my pleasure. And Henry?
No, that was really interesting. Much enjoyed.
I know you always enjoy it every week, and thank you for that. And Anne, anything you'd like to say, Debbie?
No, that was all good. You know, we managed to ask a few questions and got a few answers.
Good.
And I noticed that I didn't have any interference in my that was probably having less people online.
Well, there is worse than being interfered with, isn't
it? I mean, you know,
it was probably the rain in Bridgend.
Yeah, and also Goff when he went off on the break missed your conversation about the washing machine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, damn, I missed it.
Oh, damn, you missed it. Damn, you missed it. So, okay then, Anne, Henry, or Goff, I'll ask anybody online if they got anything in a moment, but Goff, Henry, or Anne, do you want to say anything else before we close up you guys today?
Good night.
Okay, okay, night, Goff, thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Night, Henri, get me that material for next week, and Anne, I'll see you next week as well.
Okay.
Have a good
Thank
week.
Have a good week, Henry. Take care.
What
Bye.
what
And we're
material
doing the
was I
Barrow
getting?
Diggers next week, Henry. Barrow Diggers next week. Barrow Diggers part 456 next week.
Excellent.
So thanks for that, Henry. I'll see you next week then.
Okay, bye.
Take care, Henry. Take care. Bye-bye. Those that are online now, I want to know, there's 5 of you online. There was 7 a minute ago. I don't know if Elise, I don't know if David, I don't know if Pazu's still online. If you've got anything online, any questions about the Neolithic period prehistory, you've got my moment. You've got me all alone, okay? If any of you, don't forget any of you online to subscribe and like, please do. And you've got the blue join button. If anyone wants to join, it's £1.99 a month. There's up to £9.99 a month, different grades. All that money goes to helping me live and survive, preferably buying pot noodles and decent cups of tea and stuff. It's the good diet that an archaeologist needs. Teaching you from a caravan. So Elise, you've got to go, Elise. What I'd like to say is that those of you liking my classes, you can always sign in on a Tuesday evening at 7:30. I'm usually a bit later than that, actually about 7:40. If you sign in on a Wednesday, you can sign in basically between about 7:15 and 7:20. So you can get me on YouTube. That's really good. It's really good to have everybody's attention. And one of the things that I'm finding, I really thought that the Neolithic period would be really, really difficult to put across because there's just so many aspects to it. The Mesolithic period was easy, and the Paleolithic period was very easy because you take a little bit about the Neolithic, the Mesolithic period, Paleolithic period, you build on that. The Neolithic period is so detailed, and my approach to the Neolithic period now, that period from around 8,000 years ago to 4,500 years ago, my approach to the Neolithic period is to take loads of little bits and sort of try to put them in together, weave them, answer some questions about the Neolithic period, rather than just say, let's look at Stonehenge. Right, okay, that's not going to do anyone any good. Let's look at Otzi. It's going to do anyone any good. So we take a little bit of Otzi, a little bit of Stonehenge, and that's how we do my Neolithic period. So if nobody else has got anything else to say in regards to the Neolithic period of prehistory, I'm going to thank you again. Any support, join button below, like and subscribe. Thank you very much. And if anyone needs to ask me anything, then they're always very welcome. You can do that. Lots of material on my YouTube channel, very, very welcome, on comments, and you can watch anything on my on my channel, from prehistory, Roman, an author of several Roman books, and anything about ghosts and sort of specific sites, historical sites, from sort of from places like Exeter, maybe looking at archaeological sites, all the way in Orkney. It's all on my channel. And Elise, yeah, appreciate the times. My notification never seems to work. Hey, Elise, what you need to do, you need to press the bell. The bell. There's the bell. What you've got on YouTube, you've pressed to subscribe, and you've got the little bell alongside it. So that's where you get the notifications. Anyway, Pazu, always really appreciate your input, Pazu. Always do. And Elise and David, he pulled over in a lay-by to listen to me tonight. I really appreciate that. Verbal, really good. Thank you very much. Very descriptive. Okay, what we're going to do, call it a night, going to call it a day. I want my food. I want my food, please. Okay, thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much, and love you all. See you next Tuesday, 7:30, or 7:40 maybe, a Wednesday. And also Wednesday at 7:20, and also we've got another one on Wednesday that we do roughly just after 11 o'clock for about an hour and a bit. So that's really bizarre stuff, locally based in the Vale of Glamorgan, but we go out and do lots of other things, look at old books and stuff. So that's what we do on a Wednesday as well, just after 11. Thank you very much. I'm off, and as we say in Wales, Ymer o'r hyd, which basically means still here. Well, I'm not going to be still here a minute. Diolch yn fawr i chi, gwelwch chi eto, ac see you next week. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Take care. Bye. Bye. The bell is pressed, adding you in my phone calendar reminders. Love it, Elise. We love you, and Pazu and David. Loving you lots. Thank you very much. Take care. I love the support. I really, sometimes I do get down occasionally, and I think, well, got a lot going on in my life, and it's really appreciated your support. Really, really love it. Thank you very much. Love you all out there. My love deeply. Take care. Bye. No, Nosta. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to do was look at my chat box. So in the chat box, it says, hi, it's axe-shaped weapon, engraved with a tiger pattern, plus clouds and birds. Source is Yishai, which is XINHUA, English News, news, english.news.com, where basically there's that great find that has actually been made in China. Right, so I'll just mention that it's a find that's been made in China, and if I can get this, it's a place called Yingshai, and it's at Yingshai. It's an axe that's been found with clouds and basically tigers and birds. So if you look that one up, then that'll be great. So that's been a new find that's been found in China. It's an axe. I think it's about 4,000 years old. Anyway, that's it. So and that's basically it. So that's also found in english.news.com. I'm off. Nostalgie. Thank you very much.